Hey everybody. So, power connections. Long story short, somebody reach out to me and say, every time they transmit it on their 655 or 955, their radio, the on-screen voltmeter drops like 2/10 of a volt. Explain that's not really an issue, but he didn't like it, and that's fair enough. Turned into, well, what can I do to stop it? I think a lot of people know where this is going. Heavier wire. It's the same story. Run heavier wire from your battery to your radio, and so on and so forth. This gentleman was very, he wanted it to look good, and he wanted it to be functional. So he was more in tune with, okay, but then I've got that cable and the fuse, and I got to splice stuff, and that's fair enough. He's referring to the standard power cables, these guys right here. And yeah, you would have to cut one of these and splice it in, or do what I have, use what I have. I've got an Anderson power pole on this one, but have that and then go over to your heavier cable. That's a solution. He didn't like that one. Said okay, you got to maybe find one of the connectors, like I've got one of those here that has the screws, and you can take the screws out and bring your heavier cable into it. Like you might be able to bring a 10 into this. You'd have to cut this all up. It's like, well, that's better, but it seemed like not something that still very interested in, but that's the best solution. And I said, well, if you're handy and you want to live a little bit more on the dangerous side, you can go to the XT90. And Stryker's going to these XT connectors anyway, so let's just put that out there. 497 is the perfect example of that. So 497s, the newer 497s have these XT60s on these. And I like these. These are used by the radio control guys, for their cars and their airplanes and so on and so forth with battery packs. So these can handle tremendous amounts of current, yet they're simple and functional. And there's tons of adapters out there now for them because of the RC guys, as opposed to what was on these before, which was these white connectors. Those who remember that 497s had the white connector. So I think I thought it was a great change. They're clearly going that way with it. So it's probably only a matter of time before we end up with XT connectors on the radios anyway. So, I've got the 60. So this is a 60. Problem with the 60s and all the panel mounts that I've found is they don't fit in the hole very well. So you've got to do a lot of hacking to this hole. So it just doesn't go in at all. You're going to have to make it wider, and then you've got the screw positions. Like if you look at, there's like a big area that there's going to be a gap there. And then if you line up the holes, like if you had it on one end, you get one screw in and you just don't get the other. So you see, it just doesn't really line up that great. Yeah, you could make it work. Or you could just get a 90, which is an even heavier connector. Not that you need it, but these just fit. The only thing you got to do is just make these holes, just oval them, get a round file and get in there and file it down just slightly on each end, and now you've got it. Put your nut and your bolt through, put a washer on the other end, obviously, since you've got an oval hole, and I can't see that going anywhere, and it's neat. It fits in there okay. It's neat. So that would be a direction that if it were me, that I would, and I was concerned about it, I would go that way. I would use one of these. And of course, you just have the other end here, and then you just wire up your 10 gauge, heavy cable like this, or I think these will take up to 8 gauge wire easily. I wouldn't say that you needed that heavy of a wire, but you just wire this in. Obviously you'd have to put a fuse in here. Somewhere you'd have to have something fusing this. You can't just run this from the radio to the battery without any protection. And if I were put the protection at the battery end, you know, in case something happened between the radio and the battery, and then you end up with an issue, you know, potential fires and stuff like that. But you know, you can have you know, a neat arrangement with something like this. I figured I would just throw this out there for all. And you buy these XT connectors are all over the place. They've got a little boot. You solder the cable in there and you put the little boot on it, and covers up your connection. You know, maybe put a piece of heat shrink over it if that's your thing, and move on with life. So, you know, I personally, the writing has been on the wall, I think, for a while, that these connectors are going to probably go by the wayside. They cannot supply the power that a lot of the higher powered radios need. You've got radios that have amplifiers on them, and they've got the little pigtails coming out of them. Like, for example, these 497s, higher powered radio, they can't use something like this for this. It's just not going to work. This radio requires a lot more power. So that's just my thought. You know, questions, comments, put them in the doodad, and catch you next time.